All right, now on to baking displacement maps from ZBrush, the final model cleanup stages, and how to use Arnold to test your maps. I'm going to show you the settings I use for a successful bake for the Arnold renderer. So in your final ZBrush file, you're going to go to Multi-Map Exporter. On the displacement settings, set your map size to 4K 4096. Make sure subtools and merge maps are on. Your map border is 12. In your file names options, I make sure that my formats are 16-bit and 8-bit TIFF. We're going to bake out 32-bit maps. Also, this is how you can tell it what suffix it's going to bake out. And I also like to make sure that my UV tile ID format is on UDIM, and that way I can easily import them into Mari, especially for cavity maps and polypaint maps and stuff like that. So I just make sure to keep them on UDIM. All right, great. Now in your displacement map, make sure to match these settings: subdiv level 1, midpoint 0, 32-bit, 3 channels off, and then I go and save it in a folder. So I'm only, and notice I have subtools and merge maps turned on, and I also only have objects showing up that actually need the displacement map to be baked onto. I've hidden jewelry, eyes, nails, things like that don't really need any map information baked onto it because I didn't really do any sculpting on that. So I'm only baking out the subtools that are visible. And then merge maps, just make sure that if there's 2 subtools on one UV tile, it'll bake both on for you at the same time. All right, now I'm going to go to Export Mesh, turn back on everything that I want to export. And then save my latest tool. And then in Export Mesh, I'm going to make sure that subdiv level 1 is the only one that's on, and merge and group. Usually I turn groups off. It doesn't really matter because you're going to clean it up later. So it'll just export all your level 1 subtools so you can import into Maya. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to show you what a successful displacement map bake looks like. So remember, it's only one channel, so you can see all this detail in the red channel only. And then what I'll do is go through and hand rename them so they all have the same naming convention. And you can use batch tools and bridge and other things. I'm sure there's other tools to rename this, without taking too much time. But that way you'll only see one map when you bring it in. All right, so now I'm going to go over the cleanup process for delivering a final version of your character model. Again, please talk to your rigging team, and you may need to include several blend shapes, multiple resolutions, correctives, low res meshes, and simulation meshes for your clothing. But just keep talking to them, and I think you'll be in good shape. All right. I'm just bringing in all these OBJs from the latest subtools, and I'm going to replace them into my outliner group in case there are any new updates from ZBrush. All right, sometimes what I'll do is blend shape the newest model to my old model just to make sure that my vert orders are the same. And then I'll just delete history and know that the edge or the vertices all match from one to the next. It just helps with the accuracy of your map bake. So right now I'm just making a file called final. So I'm cleaning up everything. Notice that she's not sitting on Y0, and that's our ground plane. So I'm going to make sure that she's going to be moved up. I'm also going to make sure her name is consistent. Optimize scene size is great. I just turn on all the settings and run optimize. Make sure only Lambert 1 is on all the objects, and then run optimize. And that gets rid of any extra materials or dirty stuff in your scene. So now I just want to make sure to put her on the ground plane. And the reason for that is it's just easier for rigging and animation to deal with. So now what I'm going to do is delete some of the faces from my two-sided clothing objects that I don't really need. The rule of thumb is think about how the clothing is going to be moving and only deal with faces that you know are going to be seen. So anything else, since we already have the Z tools working and everything, and the displacement maps working, I'm just deleting any bits on the insides that I know I'm never going to see. You always have your backup subtools in case you need them later. And this is another reason why the inside of the clothing is UV'd in separate areas. So it's just very easy to select and delete that area. And if you see any penetration, just kind of take care of that stuff. All right, I'm running optimize again, making sure all my history is off. Now I'm going to make sure all my pivots are in the center. And then I can export this model as a my binary. And then it'll be my clean, quote unquote, published final model that I can give to rigging and I can give to look dev. And when I import it, everything is super clean. All right, now I'm going to go into an Arnold light rig scene that I already have set up. So it's just kind of basic light rig setup. And I'm going to place my reference in my latest publish, which is my binary file. And now see, she just lands right at the perfect place. Now I'm going to assign an AI standard shader to all of her objects. And then when I select, just drag select in the window, I'll be able to select all of her individual objects. And when I press arrow down, I'm able to access the shape node. Now what's important about that is from the shape node, I can assign different rendering parameters. Where you can't, if you went to the attribute editor and tried to change it, it'll only change it for one of them. So this is the only way to change them for all of them. So you can select, press down arrow to get to the shape node, then you open up your attribute spreadsheet, and what we want to do is we want to turn Cat Clark smoothing on at a level of 2. So then you just go to the All tab here, and just go to the filter and select subdiv. So sub, type Cat Clark, and 2 iterations, and now all of them have that level of subdivision. So now I am saving a version of my turntable, making sure Arnold settings are on. And I can do a test render in the IPR to see what that might look like. All right, that's looking pretty good, but it has no displacement on it yet. So what I can do now is just do a little bit of tweaking on the shader. And I'm just tweaking the specularity and what my main colors are. This is just kind of basic Arnold shader tweaking, and I just want it to be a certain way to sell what the material is going to look like with the detail on it. And remember, this is way before textures. This is just to make a nice turntable for your client, for your lead, or just for yourself. All right, so now if you go to your AI standard shader, you're going to want to go to the shading group and In your shading group, you want to pick your displacement map texture. You're going to pick a file texture, and that's where you're going to import your newly baked displacement maps. So you get this file texture, you're going to bring in the name, or bring in your recently baked file. And here's the reason why a naming convention is so important, is because when you change it to UDIM, then it automatically knows to add this tag, and it will read the one texture for displacement for everything in your scene. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure your default color is turned all the way to 0 or black. And the reason why you want to do that is because black is your 0 point. And if there's no displacement assigned to a certain object, like the shoes, for example, then it's going to receive a black point because it's not one of the UDIM files that's included. And if it receives a black point, that means it's not going to change at all. So now what I can do is load my Arnold preview, my Arnold render view, and I can see all the displacement detail coming out. Great. So I know that my displacement maps are working. So the next step I'm going to do is just to double check that all my details are looking good, is I'm going to just do a quick facial render. But I'm also going to add some different materials to things like my sunglasses. I'm going to make sure that opaque is turned off so I can turn up the weight on my refraction in the shader. And that just makes it so I can see through the lenses. And stuff like this you usually don't have to do in a production environment. It helps you understand the shaders more, and it also sells your model a little bit more when someone sees, that every bit is working the way you intend. So I'm just doing an IPR of her face and just adjusting materials to the way I want to see them. So all that facial detail is showing through, which is great. And now I'm going to apply a metallic shader to all the kind of the jewelry and bits and bobs. And that just adds another layer of detail that, maybe isn't necessary for if you're not a look dev artist at your studio. But it's really nice to be able to, quickly and roughly look dev different parts of your model to kind of show what you were thinking as you were designing. So I'm just kind of playing with all these bits, just trying to get something that looks nice in a position that I like, and make sure it's not too distracting, the kind of material changes that I'm making, because I really just want to see the gray shaded stuff. So I'm going to continue to tweak materials and just kind of get the color scheme in black and white the way I want. All right, now you're seeing just a really quick view of what it would look like once your textures are sort of done on the skin. And all I'm doing is using the Polypaint Bake option from ZBrush just to quickly show kind of what I was thinking tonally on the character. And I'll show you how to bake those out in just one moment. All of what I'm doing right now is kind of overkill for just a model turntable, but I just want to show you how easy it is to quickly throw on different materials, manipulate the specular weight and roughness, just to kind of sell your character design even more. So using the Arnold render view, it's using the IPR feature, and it's just rendering everything so very quickly. I'm going to add a different material to my pearl necklace. Just rough, quick shader settings to get there. I would check out Solid Angle's website for more details on different materials for AI standard shader, and then you can just nail those values for yourself. So I'm just going through and messing with shaders and just kind of lining up values the way I want. And this is just for a more personal turntable look. So when I go into ZBrush to bake out my polypaint texture maps on my body, all I got to do is go back to the multi-map exporter and pick texture from polypaint, make sure my UV map size is 4K, and then I just bake them out the same way as my displacement maps, and then make sure all the names also line up, and then you just apply them as a color map in your diffuse. So that's what you're looking at here. So I'm just testing out some better cloth settings on my shirt and skirt objects. I think that's working pretty well. Just gonna tweak a couple things. And you can spend, a bit more time on this. But I think for now, this is looking the way I want. So, yeah, let's move on to the final chapter.